But my full name now is Alexander Cunahan Thornton. When I enlisted, my name was Carl Alexander Thornton. Um, I had enlisted back in 1988. So I went in, well, I signed up during my junior year and I went straight in after I graduated from high school. So I'm originally from Massachusetts, grew up on the South Shore, Plymouth, Massachusetts, not too far from Boston, south of Boston, where most of my family are located in that area. Um, I was at Paris Island in South Carolina for boot camp, and I enlisted as a grunt, as an 0311. Um, yeah, from that and from boot camp, I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, as most people are after Paris Island, on the East Coast. I went to Camp Geiger first of all for the infantry training school. During that time, I believe Al Gray was the commandant, and he started something called Marine Combat Training, MCT, to basically try to enhance Marines who were not going into 0311, their sort of tactical skills, field skills, and so on. So we had I think it was just a month, and then I went into the School of Infantry, or the Infantry Training School. I think it had changed names. And that was at Camp Geiger, also in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Um, and From there, I went to my unit. At that time, I was in a 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marine Division, Fox Company. I spent a couple of years there. As a grunt in 0311, but during a deployment to the Philippines in 1980, I guess it would be 89, we went to Okinawa, Japan, to a deployment to spend 6 months there. We flew there. And during that time, there were coup attempts against the president of the Philippines at the time, Corazon Aquino. So we deployed there for, I think it was around a month and a half, to Subic Bay Naval Air Base. And the idea of our job was to do patrols around the area, basically to chase around the NPA, the New People's Army, in the jungle, more or less. And that was the first time we were actually handed live rounds, so that was quite a unique time. I carried the Prick 77, the radio, for my platoon. So going up and down those hills in the jungle in the Philippines was quite challenging. Yeah, from there we went back to Okinawa, but we had done probably 3 jungle warfare training schools, one with the Filipino Marines and another one at the Northern Training Area, Okinawa. From there, we returned to Camp Lejeune. At some point, we did desert training at 29 Palms, California. That may have been before the Japan deployment. But during, what was interesting about the Philippines was that I recognized somebody from Stapleton. Stapleton was the strategic target acquisition platoon, a scout sniper unit. I recognized this guy immediately. He was a marksman instructor during the second phase of boot camp, and I had a chat with him. He said, "Oh, yeah, I recognize you." Probably didn't, but he told me that they're going to run an indoctrination for Stapleton when we get back to Okinawa, and he asked me to try out. So, which I did. And it was a week-long indoctrination to join Scout Sniper Unit in 8541. And I passed. I was accepted into the unit. So back at Camp Lejeune, I joined them officially, and we deployed not too long after that to the French Guiana, which was really interesting. We received a briefing from think he was a colonel with recon, force recon. This school was something that had recently started the French Foreign Legion to train Marines. I think the force recon was the first, if I'm correct in remembering. I think they were the first yeah, American military unit to go and do this training. It was a prisoner of war jungle survival school, so it was quite an intense school. They told us that the idea behind it was at the time there was the Colombian drug wars were going on, and they wanted to deploy special forces units there. So the Force Recon was one of them. Our battalion commander at the time wanted us to receive that training. So I think we were the first Scout Sniper unit to receive that training, and that was for the month of October. Because at that time, although we didn't know it, Desert Shield had started. Um, uh, we found out on a hasty return back to Cherry Point, which was a hectic situation. I'll get back to. We learned that we were going to be deployed to Saudi Arabia and to prepare for Desert Shield, well, Desert Storm, and we landed in. I think we arrived in December. We were, one of the later units to arrive, um, and we spearheaded the ground attack going to Kuwait. And because of that, my unit, we did see some combat. And yeah, we worked in small teams. The snipers, who were sniper school trained, we did some internal training, but some of the snipers who were school trained at sniper school, they were deployed with infantry units in the armored personnel carriers. So they were locked in a metal box, and they weren't very happy about that. And because there was some disagreement higher up about how snipers were going to be deployed in the desert. Um, we had them out in forward observation posts around perimeters that me and my staff sergeant would bring in on a Humvee. But because we were forward of the infantry units, we stayed ahead of them. We were the first units through tracks, made cuts in the breach, first of all, the Saudi berm going into Kuwait, and through minefield areas that were cleared. And we encountered artillery from the Iraqi defenses, from the trench lines and bunker systems, and from there, from small teams, three-man teams, we deployed. My platoon sergeant, he kept cover on top of the Humvee with a sniper rifle, while myself, my staff sergeant, and a corporal, we engaged Iraqi army in the trench lines. I went in first, and started clearing bunkers. One of the trench lines with 20 Mike artillery, 20 Mike guns located, and so I counted the enemy in the bunker systems there. So using hand grenades, I would clear the bunkers, and then as we were trained to then immediately with our rifle fire some rounds inside. And that's where, yeah, a lot of the combat during that first day was as one would probably expect. We ended up clearing a few of these systems, and we received some backup from 50 caliber machine guns on Humvees. I was dropping M203 grenades from my grenade launcher, my M16 downrange, when the Humvees showed up, and some white flags started popping up from various points in forward of us, and I don't know. I don't know how many, the numbers of those who surrendered seems to increase over time, but I don't know. There were 50, 100. I don't know. There was a large group that surrendered, and yeah, from there it was basically we're still forward, continuing maintaining our pace, staying forward of the infantry units, clearing anything that we saw, buildings, sheds, other things, collecting in any intel that we came across from any of the from the defensive positions and so on. Yeah, so yeah, it was like that. When things started to settle down, we stopped outside of Kuwait. We went into Kuwait city. We went to the embassy, the American embassy. Went to the roof, and it was, the embassy was pretty shot up in certain areas, and it had already been cleared. And yeah, we set up outside of the city. At that time, there was a lot of people leaving on the main road. We just became accustomed to trace arounds, people shooting, leaving the city, and yeah, we just settled in and just waited for word. Some of the scuttlebutt was that we would continue to Iraq, which obviously didn't happen. And we ended up leaving in around, it was April, that we went home because we saw combat. President Bush, the senior, he wanted to get the combat troops home. At least that's what we were told. Get us home first. So yes, we were one of the last, if you want to say it that way, units to arrive and one of the first to leave because we encountered combat. And it was yeah, it was a very surreal experience. In the middle of that, as we were approaching Kuwait, I mean, there were just some, pretty surreal experience that it just seems out of body at times. Helicopters flying low and all the dust kicking up and people running around, missing hands, jaws hanging off faces. I mean, it was just a real, powerful, imagery, on top of just seeing with your own eyes the impact of hand grenades and M16 rounds on the human body in a close combat situation. Yeah, which, just still memories and that I carry today. Daytime, nighttime, I see it, I smell it, burning flesh, things of that nature. It's I was told at the time, which wasn't it was quite stressful at the moment. There was some word, my platoon sergeant, my staff sergeant, he had an argument with some officers or higher ups anyway, in the CO tent, that they wanted to do some kind of a investigation or something on our activities, which was squashed, of course, immediately. But it was a moment. It was the first time as a Marine that I felt kind of disappointed, or I don't know. I don't know how to phrase it exactly without coming out the wrong way, but just disappointment is probably a good word for it, I suppose, because it went from maybe that's an initial reaction. They want to do like, okay, there was some combat, but what happened, what had transpired, what weapons were used, because I think that was part of the issue. But then it went from there to a commendation, a medal, a naval commendation medal, which after I had left the Marine Corps, I received a letter from Boston University Naval War College. They were looking for me because I was going to be awarded. They wanted me to attend a Marine Corps ball in Boston at the Coast Guard Club to receive a Bronze Star with a Combat V. So it was, yeah, just lots of mixed emotions, and yeah, just some disappointment by the senior officers, but a lot of the enlisted. There was a lot of support from my company first sergeant. Said, Sergeant, I don't want to say any names, but my platoon sergeant, told our first sergeant, who was a Vietnam War era veteran, kind of looked in, sounded a bit like James Earl Jones. He said, Thornton, I heard you got your cherry busted today. Um, he said something after that to the context of, um, I don't want, just put it in its proper place. I don't want to hear about you, um, shooting him a McDonald's from a church tower when you get out, or something like that. He had a very strange sense of humor, but I understand, I understood what he was talking about. But he was a great, you know, a source of, being level-headed and even keeled, and so he was a guy, he was a man you could rely on, and but anyway, so so with that sort of those instances and examples of some, I don't know, just some disappointment in your seniors. Yeah, I was thinking of staying in. I ended up getting out and try my hand at going to college or something like that. Use the GI Bill, that sort of thing. When that letter came up about the Bronze Star, the combat fee, but yeah, but that's sort of a quick bit of an overview of that time. Hmm. Okay. Yeah. So I'm from Massachusetts, outside of Boston. I did most of my growing up in Plymouth, Massachusetts. I, yeah, I joined, there was some, it was a Ronald Reagan era kid, the Cold War was going on, and grew up, watching, all these World War II movies and Vietnam movies. And my uncle was in, I had an uncle that was in Vietnam. I had another uncle that was in the Marines. And Yeah, so I wouldn't say the military was a major um, um, occupation in my family, but a few of my members of my family did join. The older generation, they were involved in the Manhattan Project, both on the civilian and on the military side. So there was, I had a lot of interest and I wanted to serve my country. I was a very patriotic kid. Um, I always kept in. I was very sporty, and enjoy sports and keeping in shape. And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do really after high school. There wasn't a lot of, blue collar, very blue collar upbringing, single parent household. If I wanted to go to further study, where was the money going to come from? So I did pop into a recruiter's office one day, and one person said, "Oh, why don't you make it easy on yourself and join the Air Force or something?" And I said, I'm not going to make it easy on myself. I had the wherewithal to know that I needed the discipline if I was going to do anything in life. Um, so yeah, so I walked into the Marine Corps recruiter's office, and I was hooked. Of course, they were wearing the uniforms, and seeing the dress blues and all that stuff. And just the history, the storied history. I wanted to be part of that. So yeah, so I pre-enlisted as a junior in high school, and then yeah, and I stuck with that plan. In terms of my boot camp experiences, it was really interesting because yeah, so I don't know if it comes through in this interview, but people still tell me I still carry a bit of a Boston accent. Um, I had no experience with the Southern accent before, so I just felt like lost in the early parts of my of the 3 months of boot camp training with all these Southern drill instructors, and screaming at us. And so the drill the drill instructors, sure, they can be an intimidating. And when I went in '88, I don't know how, to what extent boot camp has changed in terms of how recruits are treated, but I was ready and anticipated any physical contact. I certainly expected the you know you know language, and getting cussed at and screamed at and pushed around. that wasn't being physical contact, being hit, and that sort of thing. That wasn't a big issue. But yeah, I remember stretching on the floor, getting kicked in the head, and getting pushing against walls and stuff, getting yelled at. But but for the most part, the drill, I have fond memories of boot camp, to be honest with you. And near the end, you're almost laughing at they found that the drill instructors were quite humorous and things that they would come up with to insult you with the person next to you. So you can't help but laugh. So I was on the quarter deck doing push-ups a lot, and guys would come by. Thornton, keep going. Thornton, you're going to be strong by the time you're going to be a push-up king by the time you leave here. So I was on the quarter deck a lot. A mate of mine, also from the area where I came from, we were in the same boot camp class, but he had to remind me of all of this. He broke his leg during the second phase of boot camp, which was a rifle range. But he told me I was a squad leader at one point, and I really don't remember any of that. Maybe it was from getting kicked in the head. I don't know. But but it didn't last because they just could see that at times. I just found Anyway, boot camp. Yeah, we at the end of boot camp, it's I'm sure it's the same story for everybody. You feel like you're ready to go to war, and you want to go. You want to keep that unit that platoon together because everything is working. All the drilling and the marching, and everyone seems to be in sync, and you know what you're doing. You're not lost anymore, and you're locked in. And so, yeah, it was a great feeling. What nearly happened to me was not graduating with my boot camp class because I ended up getting a case of pneumonia. Um, I was on fire watch, and I was like spitting blood in the in the drill instructor's water scuttlebutt there. Is that what they call it? The water bubbler there. And one of the guys heard me, and I think I was changing shift. We're changing shifts. I was waking the next guy up, and so he banged on the drill instructor's door. Yeah, and step side so and so, recruit Thornton, blah 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 blah, and he's doing what? So obviously I went to sick bay. They put me on antibiotics and so on. They diagnosed me as having coming into some pneumonia, and I had to go back. So we're talking about maybe a week probably or two before graduating, and so I didn't go back to sick bay. I just took the meds, and I was just hoping that somebody wouldn't come looking for me. Um, um, which is, I wasn't trying to be, a hard guy or anything like that. I remember in the Marines, we say sometimes being hard also means being stupid. Yeah, so I just didn't want to miss out and not graduate with those guys because we had built that bond. So I kept quiet. I took the meds and, took them, when I was home afterwards on leave. So fortunately it went away. But yeah, I was, it was a great experience, and um, I kept in contact, I think, with one of the guys who ended up getting into a really serious car accident, and he was medically discharged, but afterwards. But yeah, but for the most part, you don't you lose track of these guys over time. You come across some of them. Some of them I was in infantry training school with, but some memories from infantry training school. Just some unfortunate racial things popped up. Squad bays, and they were open squad bays. Maybe they still are in Camp Geiger. I don't know, but open squad bays. Guys filing out of there and fights, racial fights and happening, and it was really, a very different experience in boot camp where you had just left and you were such a tight unit, and you go infantry training school and it's chaotic, and but all that stuff settled down, but there were a couple, another incident of a similar nature happened at Desert. 29 Palms Desert Training. it was a guy that I shared. So those weren't open squad bays at Camp Lejeune. We were in the fleet. Had three bed rooms and a barracks, and um, so a guy that I shared barracks with, a Southern boy from Missouri. Yeah, you would use racial slurs a lot. Well, got him into trouble. Outside of Pendleton at the desert at the 29 Palms, where yeah, a big another racial fight broke out. I saw him, a bunch of guys. I didn't hear what he said, but a bunch of guys jumped on him. So obviously it wasn't a fair fight. So I dropped what I had in my hand. I think it was my laundry bag. We're all out getting our laundry done. Ran over, knocked guys off of him, and some of the guys picked up rocks and came after me. And at that time, the chaplain and some MPs came up and broke it up just in time. I would have been in big trouble with those rocks. But yeah, but I was because I was involved, I was put on duty on sort of I had a guard crates of MREs. I had to stand and walk around it in circles. But our gunnery sergeant, he just said to me, I heard about you did Thornton. Good job, saving, protecting, my buddy there. But yeah, anyway, it was the fleet. The fleet could be pretty chaotic at times. The Fleet Marine Force, that is, being a grunt, it was pretty chaotic at times. But and I'm in touch with some of these guys today, and definitely in touch with my stay platoon. So a few of my stay platoon guys. Yeah, it was really interesting. One quick aside I should make to that that the Desert Storm experience was I had a friend of mine was working who was in my infantry training school platoon. He worked for the I don't know if it was S2, it may have been S1, but he was the company commander's driver. So he did a lot of jobs. He was a fast talking Southern boy, and he was older. He was in the construction business and all that, so he was a little older than us, and he went in because he had to. He was he was going to marry his dad's mistress. It's one of these strange stories that you hear from guys in the South. I don't know, but his dad said you're not gonna be part of the family fortune anymore. So he joined the Marines. But anyway, he at Desert Storm, he heard all of these things that were being spoken about after from the combat experiences. And a chaplain wanted to talk to me, and he said he's not going to want to talk to you. If he's going to talk to anyone, he's going to talk to me. But he would tell me that officers, were writing themselves up for Silver Stars and all this other business. And so there's just a lot of, and this stuff gets around, and it's the very it's a bit of disillusionment with how things work, and how officers, true or not, I don't know to what extent some of these stories are exaggerated, but he's typing these up, and he pushed himself away from the typewriter, and he said, "Sir, I'm not doing this. I don't want to take part in it. You want to write yourself up for one of these things, you and your buddies do it yourself," because he would hear over the phone, "Oh, what do you want me to put in the write-up?" And "Oh, just just put in whatever you want." But it was just a strange time, because there wasn't a lot of ground combat in that war. It was an air war. But it's just because, we had a lot of training, and our battalion commander wanted us to be at the front to spearhead that ground attack, which is the only reason why, we saw the combat that we did. But yeah, but if it wasn't for that, I don't know, I could have been tempted to stay in, but I don't know. I got out anyway. I tried out the Marine Corps Reserves when I first got out, and there was a gunnery sergeant there who was recon. They wanted me to take over the state platoon. They had started one. They were originally up in Maine, but they were moving down to the Cape Cod at Camp Edwards base down there, but he was not happy about that. This captain told him, "Oh, we got this guy, Corporal Thornton. He, on start, combat action, blah, blah, blah. And he's going to take over the scout sniper unit along with this other guy. The other guy was the fellow who broke his leg during second phase of my boot camp training. And we're all still great buddies today. He's been out to see me here where I live now. But yeah, he was not happy that these active duty combat experienced Marines were going to come down on that camp, down at that base and take over this unit. He was really, I don't know, he was really soured by that idea. And he told me in so many words, he said, I don't care who you are or what you did, doesn't mean shit to me, doesn't mean shit here. And I said, Gunny, well, I said, for a gunnery sergeant, you're pretty unsat, and yeah, I just kind of left and came back after the weekend. And he said, you weren't supposed to leave. And I said, okay, well, that was news to me. And he said, I'm going to write you up. I said, well, that's fine. I'll take the page 11 and take it out of my SIB and throw it away. I said, look, I don't need to be here. I was told, you know, um, Captain so-and-so, I don't remember his name, what he wanted me to do. And you obviously don't want me to do it. And that's, I don't know what you want me to do about that. How you're treating me and my other, the other Marines wasn't right. It's basically he was with schools, I think, and he was in the reserves and he didn't see any combat. And for a lot of Marines, that's a hard pill to swallow because a lot of guys who had, uncles, fathers, whatever, grandfathers, there's a history of, from World War II to Vietnam, Korea, and so on. There was their like trigger time, and that was like the word that I heard an awful lot. So for those of us who did see some combat, we did receive some attitude afterwards, and I think that's where a lot of that like sort of animosity came from, or comes from. So yeah, it was an interesting time. Completely clueless. We had no idea what was going on. We were so like busy. Like I said, we had three jungle schools. We in different countries. We thought we were preparing to go to this Colombia drug war training, particularly obviously after the French Foreign Legion, because Guyane Commando is what they call it. And that's where we had our sight set. And we hadn't, there's no social, there's no internet, there's no like social media, there's no iPhones, there's nothing, none of that stuff. So we weren't, constantly checking stuff, and it just wasn't possible. And so, from Japan to the Philippines, back to Japan, doing super squad competitions. No, still a grunt. We won our battalion level, by the way, and we were just busy. We were just in the bush, in the field, training. No time really to catch your breath. We kind of came back. I went right into that stay platoon after passing the in-dock, and um, and then it was off to French Guiana, and it was just on the flight back that we learned we were going to go to the desert, and we said, "What are we going to the desert for?" So yeah, so that's our desert training, or my desert training was when I was a grunt after when I was within my first 6 months in, the unit came back from cold weather training. I wasn't with them, and then we were off to 29 Palms. So that felt like ages ago, and after all those jungle schools. So yeah, it was quite a surprise, to say the least. And so when we landed, so we're on one of these charter flights and land in Saudi Arabia and getting off that plane and the blaring sun and the heat, and it's like, what are we doing, But we get into the tents and the tent city that was set up, and some Baskin Robbins there and all this stuff. It just seemed like the strange planet. And just gearing up, getting ready for whatever was next. And we learned we were going to head out and get onto the Saudi berm and get ready for the ground war to kick off. And yeah, so we were preparing, I went to Humvee school. I was a Humvee driver for the unit, packing it, with the law, and AT4s and the ammunition and, just getting it ready. Pretty much all of the Humvees, or as we were lining up, we were removing parts of it. We were ordered to, remove glass and doors and just all kinds of stuff and just make it safe because of shrapnel. Everybody was worried about, shrapnel from glass. We were worried about this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, it really hit. It just felt again with the surreal feeling again because, so we drive, here we go, we're heading off. I found a camel skull. I tied it onto the roof of my Humvee. Um, um, and here we go. The trucks with the plows on it, plowing, cutting the breach, cutting through the minefields to make a lane for us, and going through that, being told to slow down, and then all of a sudden, until we start getting hit with artillery, and it's like, okay, wow, it's on, and yeah, it was just, it was quite, yeah, I don't know, I don't want to say the word shock because like a lot of your training does kick in, like as repetitive as it is, it's repetitive for a reason, and I knew that and I respected that, um, and a lot of that training, yeah, it was just become, instinctual, like asking for a hand grenade and just immediately taking the safety off and pin and just because I think my staff sergeant took the safety off and then I took the pin out, and just going, it's just because it's just an extension of you, and it was, and then, going in there and clearing it with the M16 and, you know, learned the site, realizing that the sights on the M203 grenade launcher downrange are really quite accurate, so it was, yeah, uh, it was something that we did not anticipate. We certainly didn't, well, I don't think really we were aware that maybe we heard some stuff about Desert Shield, but in terms of an escalation Desert Storm, and we were just in the thick of it, and with the Legionnaires in the month of October, we were able to go home on leave in November for a bit, and I drove home, on the way back, dropped my dad off at UMass General to get part of his leg amputated, and just all this stuff was just going on, and um, yeah, and then off we're flying off to Saudi Arabia. It was just an incredible time. Um, believing, just to go back to French Guiana for a moment, that after receiving the briefing from the Force Recon about what we were going to do, we were told that we can bring our own weapons. I didn't have any, but some guys did, but then they were pulled at the airport. So there was a lot of crazy stuff. The idea was that we were going to go straight from there to Colombia. I mean, there was all kinds of stories, and I guess, more misinformation or misunderstanding. I don't really know anymore what the background was, but it was certainly for Colombian drug war training, and we um, we we landed at night, and at a little airfield, and crunching through, you know legions of cockroaches beneath our boots, and we arrived at this training area, and we just get a quick little induct from, or just orientation from the French officer there. Only the French seem to be the officers. The regulars just seem to be from all walks of life, as you probably, something I remember from old French Foreign Legion movies from the 30s and 40s. But we yeah, we were run ragged through the jungle. We had to, after learning about the various traps, and that the Legionnaires encountered during Vietnam from the Viet Cong. We learned how to build all of those things. I learned the hard way. These pits with spikes, these flying mace balls. We made triggers, we used them from triggers on the base of trees, and hoisted these menacing balls of sharpened, pointed sticks and timbers, and they were heavy, and we hoist them up, and yeah, they would swing down. You could see how dangerous and how that would affect the unit from people, even if didn't die, they were maimed and badly, injured, and how that would slow you down and psychologically. So they wanted us to really feel that, to get the sense of that, to the extent that they would bring us out into the jungle. They would load live rounds and shotguns and scream at, yelling at us in French and telling us to take off our clothes, and they would throw old uniforms and boots. We'd just put on whatever was next to us, and they would run us into the jungle, just try to get us as disoriented as possible. And then they did give us a shotgun, some fishing line, and radio. We had to call in checkpoints. We had to make our way to a tributary, build a raft, float in it, and then get picked up somewhere, in the pirogues, the dugout canoes that they use down there. And yeah, it was quite intense training. Learning how to, if you fall, you're escaping in an escape scenario, how to fall and protect yourself. There's just a lot of interesting obstacle courses that you would never see in a U.S. military school. They would not be, you know, yeah, they're just pretty extreme. Jumping into holes in the mud that you don't see, and I don't know. It's now all this stuff is on YouTube. Now you can see it. What this training looked like, and but on the flight back, I was mentioning it was a bit hectic. We actually didn't. I don't know if we missed our flight or the captain just or whoever, they just got sick of waiting. So that's the C-140 left without us. And we're like, oh man, what are we going to do? We've got to get back to Cherry Point somehow. And this other pilot heard us. I think he was a Marine Corps pilot too. He overheard us and he said, well, I'm out on the tarmac now. If you can throw your stuff in the back within 10 minutes, you can come with me, but we've got to stop in Puerto Rico first to pick up a mortar unit, a mortar unit or something like that on the way back. And so we just bolted out there and got on. But again, during that flight, we got word of what we were going to do next, which was go to the desert. So it was interesting time. Yeah. So we had no idea really what was going on in the world. Yeah, I think it's a good mixture, I think. So at that time, I hadn't been to the formal Scout Sniper school yet. I went to the Scout Sniper, the formal one on Camp Lejeune when I returned, which was interesting. But we had, as a lot of state platoons did, I don't know if they still do it at the time, probably do. They do a lot of internal training, so training with the sniper rifle, making a ghillie suit, stalking, covering concealment exercises, and so on and so forth. Land nav, of course. And we did a lot of that, and we did some of that with the French Foreign Legion as well. But to answer your question, it was definitely a mixture. A lot of adapting, innovation, but also the collecting of intelligence. So anything that we came across a lot of weapons too that we confiscated, but lots of written material, notes and books that I couldn't read obviously because it wasn't in English, but there was all this intelligence we're passing on to our S2 officer, and so yeah, so it was a mixture of those things. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I did actually keep a journal while I was there. It's something that I want to write up. I haven't gotten to it yet. Yeah. Uh, I actually didn't think it was gonna, and it's written down. I actually didn't think it was gonna last that long. I was aware of the paper tigers comment from Saddam Hussein, but it was interesting, right? Because I opened it up recently because I have a young son, and I want him, like I mentioned, I want him to read about these things and that his dad got up to when he was a young man. And when he was a jarhead. And yeah, I think we'll be out of here in April. And we were, that's what happened. 'Cause there was the bombardment, and we could hear it and feel it. I mean, we had, you know, like we were dug in, and the Saudi berm, and we could, and and outside once we had cleared the berm, we wherever we dug in, we could just, the sand is sprinkling down on your fighting hole, and um, but yeah, so we were right on the border, heading into, we're on the Saudi berm was the line demarcating, Saudi Arabia you know, from Kuwait, and we had to wait for word and a cut in the breach, this big sand dune, a big long line, and was called in. And when that happened, we were off and running, and it was go 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 go. And our I was so I was the driver for the Humvee for my platoon, and we were really small now because, like I said, the snipers were um, were um, deployed with the infantry units and in the armored personnel carriers, right? And so we were tasked with, like, we were like a small, recon intel, team, and we were going forward before the infantry units to collect information, and we were receiving fire, small arms and mortar fire, artillery fire from the Iraqi defense line, these trench lines. And so we just quickly deployed, and we were clearing these as a small team. And that was our job, and that's what we were, that was our mission, as it were. And that went on that day, and when as we're receiving more and more, like, Iraqi troops surrendering, we go from one location as we were pressing on, and at some place, sometimes we would feel like so exposed because we were on our own at times. But there were other, we would feel, it was quite a good sense of security when the artillery and units the infantry units would start catching up. Or what happened first was the M1 Abrams tanks came up first, and man, did that you feel safe when those guys rumbled up. And they're really impressive. And so following in behind them, and or having to hold back because there's a tank battle, and helicopters are going because there's some mechanized warfare going ahead of us. And then we would go and again and try to collect whatever information and weapons and things that we could find. So that's what it was like. So it was a real, it felt like you would imagine it would, for the most part. And you know going into a combat situation. And so yeah, yeah, it was there was a lot of, yeah, there were a lot of moments where, yeah, in addition to feeling exposed, you feel, yeah, you're just watching people die too. They're burning vehicles from the enemy, the Iraqi military. And you hear banging and voices, and um, you're just in secondary explosions, and sometimes you're too close. Sometimes we're clearing an area that looked like a munitions depot, and there were large oil drum sized cans. And we had to demolish those. And and some very quite spectacular explosions, and some smoke and things like that, yeah, we weren't anticipating, or maybe we should have, I don't know. But just again working as in small units, and small teams, and those doing those types of jobs. Yeah, it was quite a, again, I say, that surreal feeling once again. But yeah, it was a very different type of warfare from what, we had really been trained. I mean, 29 pounds, that desert training there, that was that didn't that I didn't think that that really prepared us for that type of warfare that we were seeing. Um, yeah, I mean, certainly as a sniper in a sniper unit, I mean, where we did some mountain warfare training in Northern California. We did some high angle shooting in Nevada, but of course there was nothing like that, you know, in that part of in the Middle East. And yeah, so we had a very different role. Those of us that weren't deployed with the infantry units, but certainly the team that I was with, we had the most uh, um, I don't know, extraordinary sort of experiences, once we got back together afterwards, during the ceasefire or whatever it was, once we reached Kuwait City waiting for further orders. Once that area was secured and we got together, and yeah, it was, but other than each other, once we were together again, and the snipers were back, and the guys that were deployed, and yeah, we were just hunkered down and just waiting for orders, and we still, you know, before the, I can't remember now, uh, we still had to send some sniper teams out to forward positions around to protect our perimeter. And so this was before we had the precursors to GPS, something called PLARS. And well, we didn't. We went. We drove the guys out to their fighting holes, and we I guess we figured there'd be enough light. We would just find our way back. But it was such a cliche, as we were driving back, we got lost. Um, we got lost, and starting to get dark. We made our way to one road, and we saw some mechanized units there, some other trucks. They were British. They didn't know where they were either. So we drove back in where we thought we had come from, and we spent the night, and there were already some reports of some military units or some people getting captured. Um, and so we took turns. We just had a 9 mil, the Beretta with us, and we took turns sleeping, and gone fire watch with the pistol. Um, you know, got quite cold, of course, so get yelled at if I started the Humvee to get some heat because we were really low on fuel. I mean, because that was the other supply issue. So we had to stop. And when daylight came, we had to make our way back, and we did. And of course, my platoon sergeant got reamed by the CO for not taking the navigation equipment that we were supposed to have. But yeah, it was an interesting time. But yeah, I mean, as far as that mission goes, I mean, we really did get it, face it, the brunt of it, working in that again in small teams in that forward capacity. And the close combat wasn't really, especially we get training in the scout sniper unit. A lot of the stuff is more long range, but here I am more in a grunt situation. So that's why I said it was more kind of a mixture. Yeah, we're working small teams, um, the strategic target acquisition, or surveillance and target acquisition. That aspect of it we were doing in terms of the surveillance and finding intel, but the close combat and clearing trench lines and bunkers and buildings and warehouses and all that stuff, that was quite a mixture of all the training that I had as a grunt going into the stay platoon. So I think because I was a Lance Corporal, Lance Cooley at the time, I felt it was my obligation to be the one that entered the trench lines. So I would I would hop into the trench line where the 20 Mike gun was, and make my way around. Um, rules of engagement. Of course, you offer the up, somebody wants to surrender, you do that. You capture them and so on. But yeah, it was initially we just didn't. It was just we didn't have that opportunity too much to do that. I went into the bunker and I was encountered by the enemy and um, he clearing that bunker. That was just the first time using a hand grenade in a live situation, and we we realized that some of these were connected. Um, when I went back in, when the smoke cleared with my M16, um, uh, a table, a wall, or whatever, it had shifted, and you could see how some of these tunnel systems were working, or angles for hiding and for protection were devised, but just seeing the at that close proximity, the impact of a hand grenade on a human body is, again, as I mentioned earlier, is just something that sticks with me today. But going in there afterwards with an M16 to shoot any rounds, and people were protecting themselves coming around a corner. I mean, this was just standard operation, and then from there it was just one after the other. They know we're there. They probably know we're in a small team, and we're just going from um, system to system, and platoon sergeant was keeping us covered. He had with the sniper rifle on top of the Humvee, and I think it was corporal. I think he may have had like the squad, the old full automatic, the SAW um, machine gun, squad automatic weapon was called, keeping cover as well. And yeah, it was. But afterwards, my platoon sergeant, he had a camera with him, and after we had taken, when the Iraqi troops were surrendering and we're processing them, and some of the infantry units had caught up to take over for us to, process to um, to steer to take the prisoners. Um, yeah, yeah, I had taken my gear off. I was on the Humvee, and he took this picture, and I still have it. It's grainy. It's very smoky. We're just covered in black and soot from the oil well fires. Um, yeah, it was just quite an image to see. You know, but yeah, he said, "Holy shit, Thornton," um, he said, I said, "I just can't believe it." He said, "You just went in and did it," and because he was new to our unit, he was a drill instructor. He just came, he just plopped into a state platoon, and suddenly he had to go to the French Foreign the Legionnaire, the Commando Guyenne school with us. I mean, we were all just getting to know each other, and he just thought I was a smart ass in Boston for the most part. He wasn't wrong, but I just like to keep things light. But he said, he started calling me Action Alec after that. He said, the way that you did that, but they're just seeing the look in my face, like, what the fuck just happened? Just yeah, it's anyway. Um, yeah, it was just quite just trying to I don't know, understand what happened, and the type of warfare that or the type of combat that it was, and how confronting it was after being with this sniper unit, and where we were training for something very, very different, right? So yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I felt that my personal feelings, I felt, like I mentioned earlier, that they were going to be overwhelmed. Um, we did, I guess, more or less catch them by surprise, although they did have defenses on the back end. and where we were coming from. Um, I was surprised to see those trench lines still. I didn't really, I don't know if we had anticipated that. They did have artillery and they used it. Um, and they did have those 20 millimeter guns and, but we knew that I mean, well, we learned anyway that they were vastly undersupplied. There were leaflets all over the place they were dropped, um, uh, encouraging the Iraqis to surrender, and I still have these. It just shows, grotesque images of what's going to happen to them to, oh, if you surrender, then you're going to have this wonderful life. There's like thought bubbles where they're joining the family, and of course it's in Arabic, so, there was, yeah, so it was, and they would hold them too, by the way, some of them when they were surrendering. Um, but I remember this one guy, he was injured, and I didn't harbor any ill feelings. I'm a professional, they're professionals. Um, they were, one guy was injured. I told him to hop up on my Humvee and give him, as we were slowly going behind the rest of them as they were surrendering, taking to where he needed to go, being taken to. Um, but yeah, yeah, I didn't feel um, any anything beyond, everybody's, doing their job. They were, Saddam was more Saddam Hussein than the Iraqi military. That was the problem, and some of these guys, we had word that some of these guys were undertrained, and although, Iraqi forces, they had fighting wars, and which is what the paper tiger came from Saddam Hussein about us, that we hadn't been in combat situations in a war in a long time. And but we had reports from that, he was throwing, the trash out there and not paying them, and they were undersupplied. But any animosity that we had was more towards, Saddam Hussein and not them, and we did treat them well. I think that's why, for my company first sergeant gave me that little speech, after he said, "Oh, I heard you at your cherry blast. I want to hear about blah 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 happening when I right in the church tower with a rifle." He just That was basically the extent of it. You've experienced combat, close up. Don't let it affect you. Try to deal with it and go out in the world. And still know if you're staying in, you're going to the civilian world, but you have to figure out how to deal with it. There's no there was no counseling or to that effect at all. And as I mentioned, there's such animosity for those who did see ground combat, from those who didn't or were on the ship and expected to get deployed. Like, you know, there was some anticipation of an amphibious landing, as Marines historically do, but we came from the back way, right? From the ground, from Saudi Arabia and into Kuwait, and but there was no, there was such little ground combat after the first. I don't know. I'm not even going to put a timeline on it, but I know that books are written about it that I haven't read. But yeah, it just it just wasn't there was no mechanism, no channel to really process and discuss any of this stuff, and it didn't happen until I was out. I went to the Boston Vet Center, and they through the VA, at the time they had these, they give you some ideas or some outlets where you can go, and maybe it was an uncle or somebody that told me about it. I don't know, or maybe it was my Marine Corps buddy. Yeah, it was my Marine Corps buddy, I think, who the guy who broke his leg, and I think he told me about it because it was what he was doing, and so I was seeing this guy. I don't know if I should mention the names, but he was in the he was in Vietnam War, and he was an officer in the army, I think, and if I remember correctly, and he was great, um, talking me through it, his experiences, and asking me about, we talked about mine and how to deal with it and so on and so forth. But I don't remember, what happened, but I stopped going. And at that time, they were doing screenings at the Jamaica Plain. It's an area in Boston at the Veterans Hospital on the VA there for Gulf War screening. And I got a letter that I should go. And I was diagnosed with PTSD. I had no idea what that was, or that but they were screening for all kinds of things. Um, because I had come in contact, and it's in my SRB in my history, and I had come in contact in the vicinity of excess of 500 plus oil well fires, and future health hazards are unknown at this time. There was stuff in there about concussions during Desert Storm, grenade, concussions from grenade blasts. Um, and what else? Yeah. Taking these, anthrax pills or whatever they were called for gas, anti-gas agents and stuff like that. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that was packed in there, that they wanted to learn, that they wanted to know about during these Gulf War screenings. And so I received a letter, I don't know, months, maybe a year later, saying that, you're you have this rating for PTSD, and there's some stuff about jungle rot, which really came from the Legion, from the exposure that we had during the Legionnaire School. But yeah, so that's what that that's what that experience was like. There's just not really anything. Maybe there is today, I don't know, but at that time there was no outlet to, while you're still in, to, I don't know what the word is, decompress or process or come to terms with what had happened. So yeah, we yeah, I mean, so we were waiting, like I said, so we were camped out there and dug in, on the outskirts outside of Kuwait City, with the city is right there. I remember we were next to a junkyard, and supplies were pretty slow to come sometimes because again, there was word that we weren't going to be there that long, and that I think it was Schwarzkopf that famously said, we should go carry on into Iraq and to Baghdad. And so I remember there were some hiccups was getting us gear and supplies and water and just all this stuff. You mentioned showers. I mean, we were next to a junkyard, so we were we were sent out to we went on a scavenger hunt. We were just found whatever we could. So I guess this speaks to what you had mentioned earlier about being resourceful and adapting. And we found enough stuff. We basically built our own shower, and when we did get water for that, we were able to actually shower for the first time in whatever it was, 3 months or something like that. And we were pretty filthy, rotten dudes for a while there. Um, but we some of the food that we did have, we would drive into the city and deliver to kids that were on the street and do what we could, and then we would get back. But yeah, it was just a lot of waiting around, and then when we finally got word they were going back, we yeah, we had to prepare the vehicles. That was a pretty crazy time too, preparing the vehicles to go back to stateside. And they wanted us to to clear out the best we can all the sand, and that meant when they showed us how to do it, taking the pickaxes and making holes in the beds and the floorboards of the Humvees and other vehicles, and hosing it down and washing away every grain of sand. And we were doing this for hours, and I remember, it was just like, yeah, days, I don't know, but it was just, yeah, it was a strange time, and there was just no, you know, getting our heads right and ready, to go back. Some guys were going to go out leave straight away. Some guys had extended to go to the desert. I still had another, what, year or so, year and a half to go. Um, um, and when I got back, it was either Rappel Master School that came up, or but then it came up that they wanted me to go Scout Sniper School, and I said, well, I just returned from a war, and I'm getting out, and you know, getting close to that short timer status, but I went anyway, and then I was fapped out the Fleet Assistance Program, I think that's what it was called, as a range officer my last 6 months because they felt that, yeah, maybe I needed it. You know, considering, yeah, actually, maybe that was it. Maybe considering what I had experienced in hindsight, I never thought of it before until now. Maybe that's why I got fapped out to, to get away from the day to day of the state platoon, and second battalion, second Marine division, and go do something completely different. And but of course, I was on a rifle. I was a range officer, so I would, prepare shooting ranges. I remember there was a Canadian unit, and there were different units going down to use the ranges. So I was doing that my last 6 months, and yeah, and then I got out, and but there was no prep. I had to think, you know, what I was going to do when I got out, and but I had never really thought about or was advised to pursue, you know, the VA for whatever, as assistance of any kind, or, in terms of dealing with, combat related stuff, or just whatever, just my time in the service and what to do. They offered bonuses to stay in, of course, but, I was getting out, and that was it. That's how my time there ended. And I drove home. Yeah, so yeah, so my decision to leave the Marine Corps, I mean, as I mentioned, the animosity from your brothers in arms afterwards, enlisted, for those who had a family history of being involved in, some kind of military engagement. They feel as though they didn't get their opportunity. That was really strange, and it was something I didn't expect. And, so I think my temper was getting short, as well. And that in hindsight, that could have been, symptomatic of the experiences that I had, and still, not really dealing with it, and just, maybe feeling some anger and or what have you. I I decided to get out. I had a younger brother, and a family back home, and maybe it's time that I did get out, try to use the GI Bill, and that's what I did. When I just drove home, um, and it's soon after, I was just working for my uncle, the uncle that was in the Marines, in the 70s, just doing, flooring, and you know carpets and floors and tiles, just earn some money. Um, I entered into the enrolled in this community college in Brockton, Massachusetts, uh, taking law enforcement again, just maybe taking the path of least resistance at the time, and thinking that that's the only thing I can really do. One of my instructors was in the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and he was, trying to push me into that direction. Um, but I think, yeah, around that time, maybe I'd started going to the vet center, and I really needed money. I started, I was just working at a sporting goods store. Of course, they put me in the gun department. And, I knew nothing about all those civilian guns, but I could tell you anything about all the other, but military stuff. But um, yeah, so the community college kind of slowed down a bit. I was going to the vet center, getting some counseling there, and then eventually an opportunity came up for the sheriff's department. I ended up going through another little boot camp type thing to work in a prison as a corrections officer, a prison guard. So I did that. And of course, word gets around fast, and would have inmates yelling out of their cells, because there was those old school Shawshank Redemption type of prison that since got closed down. But hey, you're that sniper, it was just really strange. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do law enforcement. I felt as though I wanted to do more, and I felt like I was missing something when I was in the Philippines during that coup attempt period. And just going to the developing world, I decided I wanted to sort of go do something in the field again. I transferred my credits to the University of Massachusetts in Boston to pursue a bachelor's degree. And I did some more. Some of those courses were, focused on the developing world. And at that time, I met my future wife, who is German, and she was in the country as an au pair. And we both decided to leave the United States to study after we had both graduated from the University of Massachusetts in Boston. And I did a master's in development studies at the University of Sussex in the UK. And then I had stayed on to do a PhD. I was encouraged to do that. I'd done my field work in South African townships, and I felt because of my background, there was no intimidation factor of me going into squatter settlements and townships in South Africa to do poverty, and food security, insecurity studies. That's what I did, and then so I worked as an academic for a while. I was in Australia. My wife and I, we were in New Zealand for a couple of years, then in Australia for 12 years. And I carried on that type of research and teaching in geography, doing just that type of field work in Sierra Leone and Zambia and Ethiopia. And then my wife and I, we had a son. COVID happened, and I decided to leave academia for a lot of reasons, and COVID gave us an excuse to do that. The type of work that I was doing, I could work more or less isolated, given the campus where I was working at, which was also a part of the Australian Defence Force Academy, which I didn't know at the time. So I said, oh man, I'm going back into that type of environment. So thinking back, at times I would just get lost in my own head, and I would, I would be reclusive and just do my own thing. I would teach classes. They're small, with cadets training to be officers in the Defense Force Academy. And, I wasn't always there for my colleagues. And I spent a lot of time again overseas doing my field work. So in a way, it felt like a little private institute at the time where I was on my own because campus was empty a lot, given the nature of the students that we had. But COVID happened. Australia was it is an island continent, but there was no leaving or people that were out coming back. But we decided to move to Germany, not the United States, but to Germany to raise our son with family. And so I'd done some contract research, going back to Ethiopia. But at the time, during the time, so this was a couple of years ago now. So the Civil War had started, and so doing so some of this field work, I'm in the rural areas, and one of the towns that we had to go to um, was attacked by the Oromo rebels, and you know, we were had to go through various security checkpoints. The Ethiopia, federal army, they were in, some roadside areas that we were eating at, flopping their weapons and machine guns and so on the tables, and you know, I felt it was interesting. There was a particular. I was obviously interested. I wasn't surprised, and the guys that I was with, they commented on the look of calm on my face, and because they didn't know me from Adam, and um, but it's just interesting those types of comments from people, and you know, so they just started asking, some of them asked if I had been in the military anyway, but then they realized why, you know, it just wasn't a situation that bothered me or affected me. So, um, but yet it puts you back into that time and those memories and all these triggers and just, over time. And now where I live, I'm in Germany near Berlin, and of course Putin's folly, his invasion in Ukraine, and and all this talk, insecurity in the European borders again. And so, it does affect you, and it is triggering. And yeah, and of course it's Berlin, and it has its own atmosphere there, its history, and um, you know, where I live is in the former East, and so there's some pro-Russia, there's some, extremism, and I don't know. It's so I'm seeking out, you know, opportunities to do some kind of, you know, I think the VA has stuff called telehealth, where you can continue with, PTSD conversations and that sort of thing. Um, yeah, talking to the help that I do get now, it really comes from the guys that I'm still in contact with. The other one, the other one who was also in Desert Storm, he served his career as a Boston Police Department, as a Boston police officer, and both of them came out to see me a couple of years ago. Um, so they're kind of like my my source of, just talking about what happened and staying grounded, and my son does too. He keeps me grounded, and which is why returning to some of the stuff that I had written ages ago now, I want to deal with it and engage with it and write it out. I haven't done the Desert Storm yet stuff, just the French Guiana stuff so far. But the Desert Storm stuff looms. I've just sort of flipped through pages of it, you know, the stuff about all the fires and the smoke, and the ground combat, the close combat, just stuff like that. I just kind of glazed over it, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. Maybe do a short story type of thing. I don't know, but certainly write it up for him so it's a little more legible, and he can, you know, not filter it out too much, but to just write it as it is, but also just making it, I don't know, try to do some kind of a format as well that might be useful to publish, that might help be useful for other guys, who served or are thinking of serving in the military. So it's still, when I reflect on it, it was still overall a positive influence in my life. I mean, again, it did give me some direction and discipline. Um, but but there's also, the realities too. It's not like, it's not all, you know, the camaraderie is real, and it's something that you do miss when you first get out. And I think that's pretty, a common thing that guys say, whether you're enlisted or you're in the officer ranks, but I think enlisted is different. Just the groups, to live, how you live, your living conditions, and how you hang out, how you spend your time, and you, some recklessness sometimes too, and so there's a lot of it that I look back on that says, it's you're such a young person, young man, and you still have so much growing up to do, and you're given all this responsibility and power as well to a certain extent. Um, and the way, the way people treat you, the way that's the civilian world, how they react and respond to, oh, you're a Marine, that sometimes I think in hindsight, or even just today, I just sometimes I think I don't know, it's a bit, how do I phrase it? You know, not all Marines, not all Army, not all whatever are the same. The experiences are different, and well, the jobs, I should say, the jobs are different. Um, um, yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I just have some mixed feelings sometimes about guys who went in, how they behaved, or how they reacted to their time and on the while we're serving on while we're in active duty, and then how they react, behave, and communicate once they get out. So I think it's a bit over the top, and I think that annoyed. That I found that, um, you know, I don't know if disingenuous is the word, but it's just over the top and exaggerated. It's just not something that I ever participated in. I wasn't the type of guy when I got out that would wear the Marine Corps garb and shirts and hats and put stuff on my truck or whatever. I don't know. It just wasn't something that I talked about or promoted. Let's put it that way. And now there's even more of that with social media, of course. But, you know, some of these guys, I remember when you were in, you did nothing but bitch the whole time and wish you were in the Air Force. And now you're out and you're more gung ho than you were when you were in. So I don't know. The hero worship and all that. I just don't like any of that. We got back. I don't like the thank you for serving thing. And I think some guys that had, a pedestrian experience, I think they really, yeah, they must really eat that up and love it. And I think I'm being more blunt than I want to be right now, um, but I don't know. And I think that sort of just pushed me away and outside of law enforcement, outside of the United States, um, and yeah, to again just a bit more, just a distance, just having distance. So I look back at it as a time that I wouldn't change anything in terms of my decision making and going in and all that, and um, but at the same time, I want my distance, and or it wasn't something that I targeted, that I specifically did. It just sort of kind of happened. I just wanted some distance, and I really didn't want to be associated with certain aspects of that, and being constantly reminded that where I was and what I did, and um, um, yeah.